I'm going to try to use, okay, perfect. I'm going to try to use this mic. Yes, just barely made it after the storm here, and then Colorado got 6 inches of snow while I was in the air. So we'll see if I get home at the right time too, but that's how it goes, right? So thank you for the introduction. Those are always interesting to hear when they say things like that about you. I'm really excited to be here with you all today. I was talking to Adam a few minutes ago about what the other sessions have been about and what people have been talking about. And I think I'm just going to reinforce a lot of things that you may already think, may believe, but also things that you've heard throughout the day. I do want to acknowledge my friend Luke is here. He's going to be taking some pictures and stuff of just me, not of you, so don't worry about they'll be like, what's this guy doing? And what's happening with these pictures? It's just me, it's not you. So don't worry about that. Like I said, I'm really excited to be here because I'm really passionate about two things in life. And the first one is leadership. I've been studying and practicing leadership for just over a decade. I completed my PhD in 2018 in leadership studies. My dissertation was all focused on it. It was actually focused on K-12 education at the time. I was a middle school teacher. Any previous K-12 folks in the room? Yeah. God bless you. And all along the way, I've been really passionate about health, wellness, and fitness. So this is a really fun topic for me because it crosses both of those boundaries. I'll also say everything I'm about to tell you today is a hard lesson I've learned myself. None of this are things that I am saying, you should do this because I'm perfect at it. It's all things that I wish I would have started doing a little earlier, and some of them, to be frank, are things I still wish I did better. So that's kind of where we're headed. I do kind of wish we weren't here together, though. Not because I don't want to be with you or be here. I mean, it's beautiful. This is great. But I wish there wasn't a demand for the kind of stuff that I talk about. I tend to talk about leadership as it relates to things like trust, things like hope, and things like well-being. Wish we didn't have to have that conversation, but we do. There's a really high demand for this conversation. But that also means that there's a really big opportunity for what this conversation can be. And the opportunity is to change the narrative. So just real quick in your own mind, when I say the word leadership, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you? I just want you to sit there with that. Raise your hand if a positive word came to mind. Okay, it's about half of you, right? I'm not going to ask the other half to out themselves as the negatives. I get it, because leadership, based on research, my own experience, and my coaching, can often be the fastest track to things like burnout. Anyone ever felt burnt out in their position? Yeah, right? Those are things that sometimes come with leadership. I don't think it has to be that way at all. And I think this is the opportunity to be the leaders we all wish we had. If we can get the foundation of our well-being in place, we can go be the best leaders possible for the people that we care for. So that's our goal. That's where we're headed. I want to give you what I believe first, and what I'm going to end with today is what I'm going to start with. I believe at my core, and I've seen, I've experienced, and I've coached people to believe this same thing, that well-being and leadership are not opposing forces. That's often how they're talked about and often how they're seen. The more leadership I take on, the more people I try to take care of, the less I have for my own well-being, right? The more I have to shrink back, give my energy to other people, not build my energy myself. That's the typical narrative. I don't think that's true. And in fact, I think it's the opposite. The best leaders that I've ever worked with and ever seen are the ones who have a solid foundation of well-being, right? It doesn't have to be like Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote, where we're always chasing it, right? And we never get it. And then it runs off a cliff and we fall. That's not the goal. We want leadership and wellness to be one and the same. And I argue, and people don't agree with me on this, so you can land where you want to. I think wellness is not only really important for leadership, but I think it's the number one leadership strategy. And I've studied leadership for over 10 years, and I've looked for that thing that makes the great leader. What is the difference? And there's a lot of things you could say. All the emotional intelligence research, right? All that stuff can come into play. Highly organized, really motivating, inspiring, all those things come up. None of that matters if you are unwell. You cannot be present for people if you're unwell. It's impossible. So I think it's the number one strategy, and until you have this right, the rest of it falls a little bit flat. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a roadmap, but I'm going to do an exercise with you first. I promise it's not an icebreaker at your table groups. I'm going to ask you to do something that you all, as educators, faculty members, facilitators, probably never do. And I'm going to ask you to take out your cell phone. I know. And I know you have one, and I know it's accessible, all right? Come on. I'm going to take this a step further. I'm going to ask you to take that thing off mute for a second.
Take it off mute?
Mute, yeah, take it off mute. So I want it to make noise. I know. Who the heck am I? What are we doing? What I want you to do now is I want you to send a text message to someone. I want you to pick someone in your contacts that means a great deal to you. Spouse, a partner, a child, a best friend, right? All of you just had someone come to mind. I want you to text that person right now in real time. And I want you to tell them something to the tune of, and you can customize this as much as you want. I love you. You just crossed my mind during my day. I just didn't want to miss the chance to let you know that I was thinking about you. Hope you're having a good day. Now, I know for some people that's could be really cryptic to receive a message like that, and they're like, what's happening, right? So customize it to your person. I don't know your person, but you get the gist of that. And I want you to type it out. I want you to hit send, and we're gonna be still here for a minute, and we're gonna see what we hear coming back at us. So that's why it's important it's off mute. I also encourage you, as we start to hear these, I've heard 4 or 5 already, pings and notifications, right? Look around the room and watch what happens when these messages come back. There's another one. I know they're like, my phone went off in a public space. Ah! There's another one. Yeah, some people are like, nothing's coming back for hours. Maybe you should have thought of a different person. Nothing I can do for that. There's another one. Okay. I'm going to encourage you now to do what all of us good teachers do. Turn it on silent and put it away, dang it, all right? You don't have time for that anymore. If you didn't get a message back, don't take it personally. It happens all the time. But a lot of you did. We're going to come back to that towards the end of today. I do want you to probably put your phone away because that will spark a conversation that probably takes more than one more message, right? Because you either receive something like, what's happening to you and do you need me? Or you received something a little more heartfelt that you want to respond to. So maybe feel free to let that person know. You can even blame it on me. You'd be like, the speaker said we were supposed to do this. That's fine, right? And then tell them you'll get back to them later. Thank you for doing that. So for the rest of the time that I have up here, I'm going to warn you that I'm probably going to overwhelm you. Another terrible teaching tactic. I'm going to overwhelm you, and I'm okay with overwhelming you because I'm going to give you a bunch of very concrete strategies that research and my own experience has shown to be super important for a foundation of wellness. So I think in total, I'm going to give you around 15 or 20. I'm okay with overwhelming you with that because I don't want you to leave here with 15 or 20. I want you to leave here with 2. So throughout the time, if you ignore me for 80% of the time, I'm okay with that. Because once you feel those 2, you might be like, oh, I'm going to sit there, and those 2 are going to be powerful. So that's the goal. So if you feel a little overwhelmed at the end of this, you're welcome. How about that? I also need to recognize that I showed up in the first week of January to talk about wellness, right? This is the time of year to talk about wellness because so many people have decided in the last week that I'm going to make a resolution, dang it. I'm going to start this diet. I'm going to start this run streak. I'm going to get up. I'm going to move. I'm going to do all these things. Love you for that, okay? This is the best time of year to talk about wellness. But the worst time to talk about wellness, if the research out of Baylor is true, is next Friday. Second Friday in January, about 90% of New Year's resolutions are dropped, right? Is that this Friday? Even worse, right? Whatever, it's soon. So I do not want you to leave here making a New Year's resolution. I want you to leave here making a vote and casting a vote through your actions of the kind of person and leader that you want to be going forward. This is not a conversation that stops on December 31st of 2025. These are things that build a foundation for life and leadership going forward. So if you're sitting here and you're like, did they really bring in a resolution guy? No, okay, not a New Year's. I didn't set any, so there you go. But I do want to set a foundation going forward to help you, and leaders I've worked with a lot, I'll often ask them, how do you feel as a leader? The saddest answers I get are things like frustrated, annoyed, overwhelmed, burnt out, all the way to I've heard things like depressed, anxious, hopeless. That is not what we want you to feel, and the teams that work for leaders that are like that are not thriving. No way, right? So this is the foundation of wellness. It's not a New Year's resolution. It's more than that. How I got into this topic, because like you heard, I have the academic pedigree that makes sense for this, right? But as you all probably know as faculty members, sometimes our academic pedigree and our real life are two different things, right? So I actually had never put the puzzle together of leadership and wellness until a couple years ago. I had a chance to present on trust and leadership at a pretty big conference for higher ed professionals. And I get through this whole thing and, I'm like, oh, that was great. Like they're all going to go out and they're going to build trust and they're going to do all these fun things. And right at the end, right, I stood right down here and a gentleman came up to me and he said, Ryan, that's so fun. Love that PowerPoint you put together. Who the heck has time for that? Right? I'm a leader in higher ed. I've got demands coming at me from colleagues, from students, from administration. I'm trying to plan out the class I'm going to teach next week, but I haven't had any time because I'm also working on this research thing over here, and that research partner needs this attention. Oh, and by the way, I also have a family, and I had to pause because not only did I hear what he said, but I felt it. I've been faculty, right? I know that feeling of what the calendar can feel like. I felt it in my heart. And after about a minute of awkward silence that I'm sure he wanted to walk away from, I said, tell me more about it. What else? It's one of my favorite questions, side note. What else? He said, well, okay, now you add on top of it, now I'm supposed to be an expert in AI in my teaching strategy, right? I just walked through a protest on campus to get to my classroom. Didn't know if I was allowed to walk through there or not, but I did anyway. And our president has changed 3 times in the last 3 years. Okay, cool. So wellness and trust, right? He's like, I don't have the energy. I don't have the time for that kind of stuff. I am lucky if I send an email to one of my team members once a week. And I had no answer for that because it's real. It's very real. But what I was able to say back was, well, you sound like you give a lot of energy. I wonder how you get energy. And this time he paused because he had no answer. He'd never thought about it. How do I get my own energy to then give to other people? You've heard the you can't pour from a cup that it doesn't have anything in it, that whole phrase, right? Falls a little flat sometimes, but it is true in ways. So I'm going to ask you the same question today, and I hope to give you some strategies to do that so that you can be the best leader possible without like destroying yourself, which does happen in leadership roles. I think of this in 4 parts, a 4-part heuristic of leadership and wellness. And we're going to go through all 4. Physical wellness, spiritual wellness, mental wellness, and social wellness. Physical wellness is the one that gets all the play this time of year, so we're going to start with that one. And I designed my slides before I realized half of you, it's like, whoosh, this is all at the bottom. So sorry about that if you can't see it, but I will narrate along the way. So for physical wellness, and like I said, I'm going to encourage you to take home 2 ideas. So on these little note cards, or if you have a notebook, or you want to use the notes in your phone, I want you to keep track of any of these that resonate even a little bit. And then at the end, I'm going to ask you to narrow it down. Okay? So you don't have to keep track of all these things. Also, forewarning, I do not have slides with a bunch of bullet points on them. So most of this is going to come from what I'm saying, and then these will guide us along the way. So I have 4 components of physical wellness that I want to dive into. And I'm going to just be forward. I'm going pretty basic with these ideas, right? These aren't massive ideas to overhaul your life. These are simple things you can do. And some of you, if you're passionate about wellness, there's going to be some of this that you're going to give me the high school eye roll, right? I've heard it before. I know this stuff. But the truth is, I have never worked with a leader. I've never taught a student. I've never met a leader. And I have never myself accomplished to have all 4 of these in line at one time. So if you're open to it, I think at least 1 or 2 of these things will resonate. So let's start with physical. The first thing in physical wellness that's important to talk about is one that our culture has just completely destroyed in the last 10 years, which is sleep. The research on sleep is overwhelming, and I'm mostly going to lean on Matthew Walker's research out of the UK. So if you're interested in this, he has like hours and hours of podcasting if you want to do it. But I'm going to give you some basics, and some of you are going to roll your eyes at me already, so I'm excited for it. Here's the first thing with sleep. And this is the first example of a tip that I want you to think about for your 2 to take away from. You should sleep 7 to 8 hours a night. Impossible. Okay, I have an 18-month-old boy at home, and the second one is due in 3 weeks. Do I sleep for 7 or 8 hours every single night? Heck no, I don't, right? But that's the goal. And what the research has shown us is if you want to sleep for 7, you have to be in bed for 8. If you want to sleep for 8, you have to be in bed for 9. Right? So we're not counting laying in bed. Actual sleeping. 7 to 8 hours a night. Not always easy, but the overwhelming numbers on this, lack of sleep leads to, I'm going to give you a few examples. Poor sleep increases your chance of all cardiovascular diseases over your lifetime. Every one of them. It increases anxiety. It increases depression. It has effects on other physical symptoms. Here's a big one, your immune system. It also completely changes the way that you make decisions. And in your leadership role, you're often asked to make decisions, multiple decisions a day, multiple decisions at a time. Have you ever been in that advising meeting with a student when you're exhausted? I have. How'd that meeting go? Right? You think that student felt like you were really present and just there with them? No. So 7 to 8 hours a night of sleep. That's your first tip, and then you'll see a bunch more as we go. Second one with sleep is a consistent routine. Do you have a sleep routine? What does your life look like in the 15 minutes before you go to bed? Emails? Social media? Shouldn't be, right? So this is the idea of every night before you go to bed. If you have little kids like I do, we do this for them, right? We're like, well, of course, kid needs a sleep routine. I mean, there's an entire like social media world on sleep routines for kids. Maybe I'll get into that world someday, right? But there are people that have millions of followers that literally all they talk about is how to get your kid to go to bed. And then it doesn't work, but whatever. But the reason we do that for them is we know it's good for your well-being. We know that, but we don't do it for ourselves. So what does it look like? Put the devices away. No blue light, right? So phones, TVs, stuff like that. Put that stuff away 15, 20 minutes before you try to go to bed. Make the room dark. Make the room cold, right? These are the basic things, but they make the biggest difference. So that's for sleep, 7 to 8 hours, and have a consistent routine. The second one for physical wellness, and this one is actually, I found people surprised when I talk about it, but it's the sun, which I thought when I planned this talk I was going to have to say something about like, well, there's no sun today, but there is, so that's great. Low angle sunlight in the first 30 minutes that you're awake. Has anyone heard of that concept before? Yeah, a little bit? So in the first 30 minutes you wake up, low angle sunlight is sunlight that's coming in at either sunrise or sunset, right? So it's not peak hours of the day. That's actually the best way to increase your sleep for the next day because it re-kicks your circadian rhythm and you begin to reset your energy levels. So if you want energy during the day, you have to let your body know that it's day, right? And I gave this presentation to some people and half of them were working night shifts and I felt really stupid. But I'm assuming none of you are all teaching classes at midnight, so we're just going to go with it. But that low angle sunlight. So what does that mean? When you wake up in the morning, open your windows. These are basic things. Open the windows, at least the shades, right? Get outside is even better. So grab that cup of coffee if it's nice enough out and go sit outside. All you need is 3 to 5 minutes. You don't got to sit out there for an hour and be like, this is my sunlight time, right? Just 3 to 5 minutes. If you do have little kids like me, it's really, really good for them too, so take them with you. That's it for sun. Going fast on that one. Next one is the one that gets a lot of attention in January, movement. If you're someone who exercises regularly and you're like, yep, I'm on this, I run all the time, I lift all the time, I love it, that's fantastic. But for even people who are really passionate about this field, in the last 10 years, man, have we overcomplicated this, right? If you jump on social media or you start reading research papers about movement, you will get so far in the weeds so fast that you'll be thinking about heart rate variability at 8 a.m. versus 8:05 a.m. And if you run up a hill versus down a hill, what that does to your shin angles. We probably don't need to do that here, okay? I had the opportunity in 2021 to complete an Ironman. I don't know if any of you know what an Ironman is, but to sum it up, it's a long swim followed by a really long bike ride followed by a long run. I was on the race course for 13 hours. It was a very long day in the middle of Oklahoma. But what I realized is although I was in what most people would consider to be peak physical shape to complete that race, I was missing some of the basics of movement. So here are the basics. Do you take 8,000 to 10,000 steps a day? If you do, your chance of cardiovascular disease, mental, cognitive disease, depression, anxiety, if you walk to 8,000 to 10,000 steps a day, those all go down. If you don't, they all go up. It really is that strong of a correlation. I'm not going to claim to this group especially that it's causal. Okay, I'm not saying causal, but it is highly, highly correlated. It can be that simple. So 8,000 to 10,000. 10,000 was kind of the first number that everybody heard about 10 years ago. Sort of arbitrary. It was a pretty small study sample size that came out with 10,000, but it was a good guideline. The more recent research is falling somewhere between this 8,000 to 10,000 number, so I always try to give that range. It's not always easy, right? I know that. Maybe the next class you teach, just pace around the outside of the room the whole time. I don't know. But you got to find ways to get movement during your day. So 8,000 to 10,000 steps a day. If you're not doing that, I would maybe make that one of your priorities, to be honest. Another easy one is, can you stand for work at any point in time? Can you get a standing desk? Can you hold a walking meeting? Right? I know me, when I watch webinars, I give a lot of webinars. They're kind of boring. So instead, I just put it on my phone and I walk around while I listen to it instead of just sitting on my computer watching a slideshow that's usually hundreds of bullet points that I can't process anyway. So can you get a standing desk? Even if standing gets uncomfortable for you, you can perch. There's not really anything up here, but if you've heard of perching, it's like having a stool behind you that you just kind of lean on like this. And the goal isn't to stand. So the research is actually pretty firm that just standing, it doesn't actually make that massive of a difference. What it does is it forces you to fidget more. So when you're standing or perching, you'll fidget 10 times more than when you're sitting. And those micro movements are what lead to that joint health and mobility. So we're really not trying to get like, I don't want this. for 8 hours a day. I want this. I want movement. I want to lean on the desk, right? You have that one meeting and you're like, oh, gosh, this is rough, right? You get that little movement in your shoulder joint, whatever it takes. But getting movement through your joints is so key. So those are the two for movement. I'm not going to tell you how to run an Ironman today. If you want to know, ask someone else because it was rough. But just move more. And then the last one for physical health is fuel. Note, I didn't say the word food. That's on purpose. Food has some very interesting connotations in our culture and our society. I am not going to argue with you about whether you should follow a guy like Rich Roll and be all vegan, or if you should be like, but Joe Rogan said, all meat all the time, right? Carnivore, vegan, there are so many diets out there. I am not telling you to do any sort of a diet, but here's what I will say, and these are 3 things that have made the biggest difference in my life as an athlete, a leader, and a parent, to be honest. I follow the 800-gram challenge. Anyone heard of the 800-gram challenge? Ooh, cool, news. 800 grams of fruits and vegetables per day. Comes from a registered dietitian out of Harvard, and that's the simplification that she has made. It's like, yeah, you want to eat better? 800 grams of fruits and veggies. If you've ever weighed food, a scale costs like $5. I think I got one on Amazon for like $5.50 a couple years ago. And it shocked me, honestly, how much it took to get to that 800 grams. So there's a learning curve in there. But you can do it instead of the 3 servings of fruits and veggies a day or whatever. The grams is way more accurate. So that's one thing I encourage. So if you are thinking about your diet as you go into the new year, yes, do all the things you've researched. But I would argue, and I think some research would guide me on this, if you're not getting that as the minimum, probably not going to happen. Most of our diets in our culture focus on macronutrients, and they miss a lot of the micro. When I ran the Ironman, that was my biggest problem, is I was like, oh man, I know exactly how much protein and carbs I get per day, but I probably get 0 magnesium, 0 iron, right? Like all those things were missing, and I felt like crap. Really hard to lead people if you can't show up feeling energized. And without the 800-gram challenge, I have always seen that I just don't feel as good. The next one is about protein. 1 gram of protein per day per pound of body weight. I would say 90% of the leaders I work with, when I start talking about diet, first they're like, why are you talking to me about what I eat? This is weird. I hired you to coach me in leadership, not coach me in what to eat, but are incredibly deficient in protein intake. And protein is the number one or one of the top nutrients for your brain. It's not just for your muscles, right? Without it, you just can't think clearly. You can't act clearly. You can't work clearly, right? So that's why I think it's really related to leadership. And then the last one, I'm not even going to give you a number for this one. Drink water, please. When I was in higher ed and K-12, holy moly, did I just never drink water. I would carry this thing around every day, and it would be this full from the time I walked on campus to the time I walked off campus, right? And I don't know if you have heard this before, but teachers, the research came out of K-12, teachers have almost double the amount of kidney diseases later in life, kidney stones and other things, than other people. Because they don't drink water during the day, because they're with their students all day and they don't have time, they don't think about it, and they're moving through the room, right? So when you're teaching people and you're in front of groups, I haven't taken a sip of this yet. Probably should have. I didn't. I'm not going to right now. You have to be really aware of it. So here's one trick I use. I carry this around wherever I go, and every time I leave a room with it, I fill it up. Well, if I leave a room and I go to fill it up and there's no room, I just gave myself an immediate feedback that, whoops, didn't drink enough water in that meeting, better do more in the next one. Or if it's completely empty, then I fill it up so I have it for the next one. So I'm not giving you a number, I'm just saying, drink more water. I'm from Colorado. We really have to drink water out there. I don't know if you've been there before, but it's just the land of sunburns and chapped lips. So water is key. Sleep, sun, move, fuel. Really basic ideas for physical wellness. And the foundation for good leadership has to start here. If you are tired, if you can't sleep, if you never move, and you don't fuel yourself right, you cannot show up as a leader in any real capacity. And I think some of you are nodding because you've probably felt it before. Next one is spiritual leadership. Some folks look at this one and they're like, ooh, we just got real woo-woo after a whole bunch of physical wellness research. Yes, and honestly, this is one that I have almost deleted from every presentation I've ever given on this topic, but I always refuse to do it. Because all the leaders I've ever worked with, and myself, a lot of times this is where the rubber really meets the road on who we show up as. I'm going to give you 3 ideas for spiritual wellness. The first one is awe. Anyone seen, there's like a ton of new research on this experience of awe. Anyone familiar with any of that? Yeah? It's really cool and not something that I ever would have really thought about. I'm like, awe, ooh, that sounds nice. I don't know what that is. But the more I researched it and then the more I started to notice it, it's kind of like when you buy that new car and then you see that car everywhere. That's kind of how I felt with awe. I'm going to invite you, before I tell you what it is and why it matters, to just have a quick moment of awe with me. Maybe. Yeah. So what is awe? And I know a PowerPoint slide doesn't really do it, right? You're like, okay. But if you were in that spot yourself, you would feel a sense of amazement. You would feel a sense of smallness, that in a world that tells you you always have to be big, you always have to be out there, you always have to be the most popular person, you would feel a sense against that. You would feel a sense of smallness. You would feel a sense maybe of the hair rising on your neck or the goosebumps on your arms, right? We've all had those moments, and there's recent research now to capture what is that? And is it important? And long story short, yes, it's very important. It's an incredibly empowering piece of the human life and the human soul, is this experience of awe. But what the research also shows is we get worse and worse at having experiences of awe because we get better at being busy, fast, efficient, full. None of that, right? Experiencing awe and being hurried are opposites. They will not happen at the same time. They never can. So what the research is trying to get us to do is to slow down and experience moments of awe in the ordinary. So I love this huge study. I want to say it was like 10,000 participants. This was the closing line of their study. That perhaps awe, while an ordinary response to the extraordinary. So this is that sunset on the top of the Grand Canyon, right? Well, how many of us get to go to the top of the Grand Canyon every day? Not many. Do it if you get the chance, obviously. So it is an ordinary response to the extraordinary, but it's also an extraordinary response to the ordinary. And that this whole research study found that you can actually experience awe right where you are. Yeah? I think some of you, I just saw some nods because I think moments in your life just came to mind for you. Here's some for me. I was on a run the other day around my neighborhood, which is like typical suburban, not a lot of awe happening there. But I'm running and I start to hear Canadian geese in Colorado. This is the time of year that they're flying through. And I could tell it was hundreds of them, right? I was like, this is loud. My first thought, that's annoying. Like, right? Like, this is a little rough. But then they started to circle above me. I was like, what's going on? And they started to land in a field next to me by the hundreds. And I just slowed down for a second and I watched them. And the way they open their wings and they put their legs out in front of them as they hit the ground, and just one after another, I was like, that's pretty awesome. Yeah. And it hit me. I mean, I get goosebumps now thinking about it, and you're all like, yeah, geese at the park, bud, like whatever. But that's the extraordinary response to the ordinary. Some other moments in my life, I've had it. The first time I met my friend's daughter, now my goddaughter, he was the first of our friends to have a kid, which is a very weird moment in your life. And you're like, are we adults now? I'm not ready. But But I went to the hospital and got to meet his kid. That was a huge moment of awe for me and fear for him, but he got through it. Another one is now I have my own kid, and just taking him to the park the other day, and he now can climb the stairs and go down a slide on his own. Kind of weird, but how awesome to stand back and not have to like walk him up and put him next to it and then have mom at the bottom to catch him. I just get to stand back and watch him do it. Awesome, right? So I just want to encourage you to look for those moments of awe. I woke up this morning, I'm staying in, I think my room's like right there. This building over here, we don't have stuff like that in Colorado. I don't know if y'all know that or not. This is not common everywhere. This kind of history and this kind of culture, so cool. Now, don't get me wrong, we have the Rocky Mountains and yeah. Okay, but amazing. But you all walk by stuff like that every day, and I wonder, how often are you just impressed by it? And in a sense of awe by like, who built that thing and how did that go? And what did they run into and who were the humans behind it? Those are the kinds of questions you have to start training yourself to ask. So have a sense of awe as you go through your day. The next one for spiritual is wisdom. I almost deleted this because it's spiritual. And it's very spiritual for me. But I didn't delete it because 2025 started off a little bit weird for me and my family. My brother pointed out 2025 started on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, so WTF, right? That's how we felt. One of my dogs, we have 3 dogs. I don't know why we have 3 dogs. We have 3 dogs. One of the dogs cut her tail really bad. If you've ever had a dog cut a tail, well, there's blood all over your house because this dog also wags her tail like you've never believed, right? So I come home from dropping my kid off at daycare, and the ceiling, the cabinets, the floor, like it's like she ran around and just like did a circle with her tail. Took me 4 hours to clean it up, take her into the vet. Turns out it's really infected. So I'm at the emergency vet at 2 a.m. on a Friday, and they tell me, yeah, we're gonna just amputate the tail. I was like, what do you mean? She loves that thing. Like, I didn't even know it was an option. I was like, you're going to wrap it up, send me home, give her some antibiotics, we'll move on with our life. No, we're going to cut it off. And we're going to do it now. You can come back in 3 hours and pick her up. Okay. So we did that. And the next day, we find out that we need some repairs on our house that are not optional. They're for safety and for wellness of the family. Okay, well, there's another like $700, and I got to schedule and figure out. While that person is in our house looking around, Lucy, same dog, with the cone on her head still, right, cone of shame, comes in, no weight on the back left foot. Like, oh, tail must really be bugging her today. Still like that the next morning. Take her back to the same emergency vet. Torn CCL, which is ACL in a dog, right? Fun. Another major surgery, maybe. We haven't done it yet because that one you actually have some time. $4,000 to $5,000 later. So this is the first few days of our 2025. I tend to live with very high anxiety. I've learned that other academics resonate with that. I don't know what it is about us, but maybe it helps us in our job. I have no idea. But my wife comes to me and says, you know, babe, I think you just need more time in the Word and with prayer. I'm like, that's a really annoying thing to say right now. I need to panic, I need to freak out, and I need to solve this problem, right? I need to get a second job. I need to make more money. I gotta do this. I need to write that research paper finally that I've been having on the books for 2 years, right? And the reason I didn't delete this is because she was 100% right. So I wake up the next morning 15 minutes early. For me, it's the Bible. For you, it might not be, and that's fine. This is not about the Bible itself. But this is about being grounded in something bigger than you. Academic knowledge is my favorite. I spend my life in it. It also is notoriously finicky because it comes and goes. You publish the research paper of the year, and then what happens the next year? Someone publishes another one that like either says yours isn't right or yours just wasn't good enough. Well, their sample size was too small. Mine's bigger. And all of a sudden, your knowledge is kind of like gone, right? Or sucked into this other place. But there are pieces of wisdom that have stuck around for thousands of years. The Bible being one of them, Bhagavad Gita, Greek poetry, Stoicism, all those kinds of things have been around for so long. And yet our culture, for some reason, wants to get rid of them because they're not empirically backed scientific research. I don't think so. I think that's a mistake. So I just encourage you, figure out what that wisdom thing is for you and make time every day for it. This doesn't have to be long, 5-10 minutes, but find some way to be grounded in something bigger. If I'm going to tie this straight to a leadership situation, because you heard the family one, I haven't worked with a leader who doesn't have a sense of this, who shows up every day present to their team. Because their thoughts and their identity of who they are as a human being is fluttering all the time, right? Oh, well, today, this thing happened, and I feel really good, so I'm here, great for my team. But the next day, oh, this thing happened. Now I'm not. And that's what I see with the leaders who don't have some sense of grounding and wisdom. So that's my encouragement for you. Last one, here's another fun one for you. This is another eye roll moment. When was the last time you were in silence? There you go. I just gave you a small moment of silence. You're welcome. Silence has been shown in recent research to be incredibly, incredibly meaningful. Scientists found that 2 hours of the type of quiet that you can find at home, so I'm not saying like you have to go into the wilderness. In fact, a study last year found that there's only 12 places in the entire United States now where you can listen for 15 minutes and not hear a sound caused by a human. Only 12 left. So I'm not asking you to go to one of those 12 to find silence, but the kind of silence you can find at your house produces more cells in the areas of the brain that fight depression and anxiety. It grounds people. A study showed that there's bigger drops in measures like blood pressure, heart rate, breathing rate when you're in moments of silence. So I'm not just making this up. This is real. So you've got to find those small, small moments of silence. I know that feels impossible. You live in you work in a big city, right? You're probably not going to find silence there. The research has shown that we have had, I think the decibel levels on average for the average American has increased by 12 in the last generation. So most Americans live, I believe it was at the same level as if you were to stand next to a washing machine that was running. We live in that amount of noise all day, every day. That noise takes a toll on us. So find ways to get silent. And again, this is similar to the sunlight, 2 to 3 minutes. And guess what? You could pair them together. Beautiful, right? A lot of these habits are things you could pair. So that's spiritual. I know that might be a little out of bounds for something like this, but couldn't delete it. Had to stay here because it's so, so impactful. Third on the heuristic is mental wellness. I know a lot of the sessions today have touched on this, so I'm super excited that there's probably some overlap for you here. I'm gonna combine two real quick about managing energy and transitioning well. Most of us manage time. Tell me if this Google Calendar sounds familiar. Advising meeting, teach a class, meet with a colleague, maybe work on that research thing, teach another class, go answer those emails, go to that department meeting, go home. That's managing my time, right? Or here's my favorite one that most academics actually feel. I should be writing, 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 I should be writing. And I'm not doing any of that, right? Or I should be prepping for class, I should be prepping class. You always have that thing that you know you should be doing. That's managing time. I want to encourage you to manage your energy. This has made a massive difference in my life in the last 10 years. I now think of it as, when do I have the most energy? So I'm going to ask that question now. Who has the most energy in the morning? Morning person? Yeah? Who's in the evening? God bless you. That's a mirror. I don't know. Yeah, I can't. I'm such a hardcore morning person. I don't even understand. I'm like, is the kid to bed yet? Because I actually should go to bed. I want you to lean into that, though. And you intuitively knew that. I didn't have to ask you to go and think about it for a day and study it and write down what you do during the day. You knew that off the top of your head. Does your schedule reflect it? Do you do your most creative work in the morning because your creative work takes all the brain power? Or are you using those morning hours to answer emails? That is a lack of understanding your energy. Now, I know there are demands from other people. I get that. But as much as you can, I want to encourage you to lean into managing your energy instead of your time. Use the time that you have the most energy for the creative, the difficult, the complicated. Use your lower energy moments for the emails. Be careful with, which meetings go where. Don't tell anybody which ones where. Your advising meetings, you probably want more energy for students because that's why we're here, right? But be careful about how your schedule's built, and to anything within your control, adjust it for energy instead of time. Related to that is transitioning well. What does the average person do with the 5 minutes between meetings? Chaos in the world, yay. Not a great way to transition from one space to another. So one of my favorite techniques that I've ever learned, and I think Lauren did some stuff on breathing techniques in her session today. So in the transition between things, you need 30 seconds. 5 minutes would be ideal, but you need 30 seconds to practice a breathing technique that is probably my favorite, which is full inhale, full inhale. If you want to practice this, you can. I'm not going to do it with the mic because it gets weird. Full inhale. When you think you have a full inhale, you take in one more inhale through your nose. That's all it's going to be. And then you let it go as slow as possible. That's been the breathing technique out of the Huberman lab at Stanford. That's been shown to be the most effective breathing technique at bringing down all the signals of fight or flight. When you come out of that meeting that really frustrated you, or that you just didn't get anywhere in, or could have been a memo or an email. Memo, what year is it? What did I just say? Could have been an email. That's the breathing technique that's going to help you show up to the next one as the leader you want to be. If you just go from that meeting or that appointment or that class that just didn't go very well. I've taught a lot of classes that sucked. And then I go, all right, on to the next thing. Let me see what chaos is happening. Hi, everybody. Not going to go great again. And then you build momentum. I have not worked with many leaders who think about the transitions in their day. So I'm going to ask you to be intentional, thoughtful, and breathe in those small moments between things. Because the people you lead and the people you're in charge of, they deserve that from you. Just to be blunt, they deserve for you to do this well and to show up well for them. They don't deserve the chaos mind that came with you. So transition well, manage your energy. The next one's related to silence, but it's not stillness in the sense that it's physical stillness. This is stillness of mind. I'm not going to dive into this super heavy because it's related to a lot of the other ones. But hurriedness and leadership don't go together. The stillness of mind. So a couple examples instead of telling you the research here. Here's two. Does anyone know what this is? Any guesses? It is a boat. What about the broad? Any ideas on who made it? What's that? One of my 18-month-old is not capable of that. Love you though. John F. Kennedy in the Oval Office on October 24th of 1962. Anyone know what was happening on that day? Cuban Missile Crisis, right? So you have the leader of the United States of America sitting in a room while Soviet ships are coming towards a barricade that we have said, don't cross this line, and they're coming, and they're not slowing down. And then within hours, they turn around. You think that your leadership is difficult and high pressure when that email shows up that's hard to handle? Can you imagine what JFK had to be feeling in that moment? Other presidents even would have been running around, talking to advisors. Me, because I'm an anxious-minded person, I'm running every scenario through my head 1,000 times. What if they turn around here? What if they turn around here? What if they don't turn around? What if they turn around, but then they come back? All those things are things that I'm doing. What's JFK doing? He's doodling in a notebook. He's still. He's calm. And this is probably the number one legacy that JFK left behind in the presidential ranks. Calm under pressure. Other presidents have since talked about that in their inauguration addresses and all the things to try to be more like that. So if you don't believe you can find stillness as a leader, I disagree. Because if that can be still in that moment, I think you can find it too. Here's another one that might hit a little closer to home. This is Dr. Michael Drake. Doctor is MD in this case. Dr. Michael Drake was the president of Ohio State University in 2020. 2020 have an effect on anybody? Yeah, higher ed institutions, you all included, me included. I left higher ed in 2020 because of what happened in 2020 and not on my own volition. Michael Drake was one of the first presidents of a big university to come out with clear, calm, and concise communication. He said things like, instead of panicking, what if we wash our hands every once in a while? What if we keep some distance from people that we're not close with all the time? Those were the measures that he put out when other universities were putting things out like, everybody go home, we know what's going to happen, and everyone, you might not make it. He was still in that moment when many weren't, and it became his legacy at Ohio State. Then, in August of 2020, so he leads one of the biggest institutions in the country through that part of the chaos. Then in August, he leaves and he becomes the president of the University of California system. So now he's in charge of not only a big university, but one of the biggest systems in the country. And when he gets there, he says a very bold goal. And remember, put yourself in the context of 2020. We are not going to lay off anybody. 0 layoffs in the University of California system. Most campuses in the US, public campuses, private, the data is a little harder to get. But most public campuses had to lay off at least 0.5%, 1% of staff. Michael Drake managed to lower the separation rate in the UCal system to 7.7% when it was 9 in 2019. So not only did he keep people, but he kept them more than they'd ever stayed at the university before in the moment that everywhere else was getting rid of people. He did that because he was calm, measured, and he had stillness in the way he approached it. So being still, finding stillness in chaos is a foundation of well-being in all sorts of contexts. Obviously, one of the wildest situations in history, and then another one, but in higher ed specific. So you too, find stillness in your day. Maybe it's in those transitions, right? These were tied together on purpose. Last one, dang it, would you celebrate yourself a little bit once in a while? How many of us as leaders or academics, when we get that email from a student saying, gosh, thank you, your class was great, what do we do with that thing? Yeah, cool, next one. What if we get the email from a student that says, yeah, your class is awful, I hate you? What do we do with that one? Oh, we like put it on big font and put it in the front of the computer, right? Celebrate your small wins. The 4 sentences you wrote on a research paper today, yeah, maybe it wasn't the 8 pages you wanted. Who cares? Celebrate the heck out of it, because that's progress. Celebrate the advising meeting you had. Celebrate the student who emailed you and said they were really excited about what you had to talk to them about today. I would say if one thing leaders are so bad at, me included, celebrating our small wins. We only celebrate the big ones, right? Before I go on to the last dimension, and I am running out of time, so I'm going to go a little fast. Anyone have a guess at what this thing is? So this thing increases risk of heart disease by 29%, increases risk of premature death by 26%, same as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, 50% increase in developing dementia, 40% risk of developing depression, and this is the big whammy for me. Unlike almost every disease on the planet, 20% of adults, so just at your table, one of you at least is in this, experiences this on a daily basis, not once in a while. Stress, not stress. Loneliness, yep. Loneliness. The Surgeon General has called loneliness an epidemic in the United States. We as leaders, we have to help combat that. So here's 3 ways I think you can combat it in your personal life and in your leadership. First one, you celebrated you, I want you to celebrate them. And not at their mid-year evaluation or their end-of-year teaching evaluations. I want you to do it all the time. Celebrate people around you. The research is also really clear that when you celebrate someone else, you get a ton of benefit from that. So be selfish and celebrate somebody else today. This one comes from Bruce Perry, who's at the Northwestern School of Medicine, which I think it's interesting that he's at a School of Medicine and talks about this. It tells you where loneliness is in our world. This is a reframe of a question. When you ask, what's wrong with that person? That person who came to this meeting, they're so mad and struggling and angry. What's wrong with them? Stop asking that question. Start asking, what happened to that person? What happened in this work environment? What happened in their life that created this as the reaction? Makes you more empathetic. If you ask what's wrong with the people that you lead, you are in trouble. Because that tells me your assumption is already that these people aren't good, and you are. You can't lead like that. What happened to them is a much better question. I know one of the other sessions is talking about curiosity. This is a curiosity question. What's wrong with them is not. That's a shutdown question. What happened to them? That's a curiosity question. And last one is what we did at the very beginning, that text message you sent. That was what I like to call listening to a nudge. And a nudge is when you think of that person randomly, all I want you to do is actually reach out to them. Send a message, send an email. When that student you had a couple of years ago who asked you for that reference letter that you didn't want to write and you did anyway, in the template that you've had for 5 years? Just me? Okay. They reach out and you haven't heard from them for a while. Last you heard, they were applying for jobs everywhere. I wonder what happened to them. Most of us have that thought and then we move on. I think the best leaders and the happiest people I know, they have that thought and then they send a message to that person. Hey, I don't even know if this is still your email, but if it is, would love to know where you ended up. How's it going? I have had the most fulfilling moments of my life after I send that and the conversation that follows. But if I didn't do it, I would never have that. So the nudges, when you think of somebody, message that person. There's more there, but we're going to move fast. I'm going to move through that. I'm not going to tell the Strider story, although this is fascinating. Think about how you learned to ride a bike, and then Strider got rid of the pedals. The power of that is I just gave you a whole bunch of stuff. I was going to say crap. A bunch of stuff to add to what you're already busy and burnt out with. And you're like, dude, you just told me like 8 more things I'm supposed to do every day. Now I'm supposed to get out in the sunlight. I'm supposed to sleep a bunch. I'm supposed to eat well. I'm supposed to do all this stuff. You know what you're also going to have to do to be well? You're going to have to learn to say no really, really good. No isn't just a boundary. That's how most people think about it. It's a vote for what you stand for. And great leaders stand for what matters most. So here's things I say no to as an example. I say no to Netflix late at night. And I'm like, late for me is like 8:30. I say no to alcohol completely. I say no to missing workouts because I know that they make me the best person I can be for my team and my family. I say no to work travel trips all the time because they don't fit with my wellness, right? So I'm going to ask you now to think of 2 things that you want to start doing and 1 thing that you want to say no to in order to bring your wellness to a new level as a leader. As you think about them, here's the criteria I would use. Pick ones that are easy and enjoyable. So if you, like me, love coffee, you aren't missing that coffee habit tomorrow morning. Nothing's going to take that away from you. Pair one of these with that. Pair sunlight with that. Pair stillness with that, because that's not going away. So make it easy, right? Pair it with something easy and enjoyable. Make it something that happens in 2 minutes or less. So instead of I'm going to run every day for 2025, I'm going to put my running shoes by the door, put them on, walk out, and lock the door behind me. Takes less than 2 minutes. I guarantee you go for a run if you do that. I don't know anyone that's going to be like, nah, goes back in and takes them off. And if you do, whatever. You already met your goal, right? But use the momentum. So 2 minutes or less. Pick something that can be done. And last but not least, give yourself some grace, but not too much. Three Rivers Stadium, since we're in the area of the country. Three Rivers Stadium took Pittsburgh. Well, no, area of the country. Okay, I know. Someone was, okay, I know. Go Steelers? I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I know. I'm a Broncos fan, dude. That's fine. It's fine. But it took $255 million, 19 months to build. It took $5 million in 19 seconds to destroy. Same thing is true for your wellness habits. They're going to take you a while to build them. They're going to have to be consistent. You start missing them and be like, well, he said give myself grace, though. And you're going to take long to get rid of them. Same concept. So give yourself some grace. You can miss a day, whatever. But don't give yourself so much grace that you destroy them. So, gave you a lot. Pick two that you want to do. I would love to see some of those get posted up here because there's probably someone in the room who has a similar idea. Maybe you can pair up. Someone else wants to move more. Weekly, Wednesdays at noon, we go for a walk around campus, right? I don't know what it is. But if you can post some of those up here, I think that'd be awesome. Two things you're going to start doing. One thing you want to stop doing, because the reality is wellness is not a nice to have as a leader. I talk about a lot of things that are leadership specific behaviors. This isn't one of those, because if you don't have this, those don't matter. So this is a decision to have energy, to be grounded, to make good decisions, and to be present to those in your care and to help them thrive. That's what leadership is. Thank you. I know you have other places to go. Thanks for your time.